That's right.
On the phone.
Hi, Shonda's here.
Oh,
Shonda, that's who it is.
Great.
Hey, Mike, I think we go to the same hairdresser.
Yeah, you're about the same.
Don't get me started.
The amazing
All right.
thing is when mine grew out, Jim, it grew out, nice color to it. And
I know.
yeah, and completely full. There's no bald spots. It's amazing what 5 months will do.
All right, folks, it's a couple minutes after 5. So just a quick technical check. I know we're all pretty used to this at this point, but we're going to have Brandy Steffen, she's right to my left in my view, is joining us today. And it's just going to tell us a little bit about the outreach that was done. So we're going to have quite a bit of our meeting be a presentation. So if you do have questions, make sure that you're able to access the chat. We'll have time for Q&A and for discussion, and we're going to make sure that we hear from all of you, but just be sure to have the chat open if you do have anything urgent that you'd like to say. And I'd ask you to keep yourselves on mute to limit outside noise. Shonda, you're in the meeting, but you just go ahead and mute yourself. I'm not going to do anything to your line, so you mute yourself on your phone and chime on in whenever you feel that you need to.
Okay, fine.
Awesome. We're glad that you're here. And it's great to see everyone. It does feel like it's been a while and it's been an exciting month. So glad to be here with everyone and to see, of course, Mike's impressive hair. I think that's all the technical stuff. I know that we have some folks observing today. So hello and welcome. And this is also being recorded. So this will be put up on the website as a record of our meeting. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Doug.
Thanks, Allison. Yeah, I'd say the same thing. It's great to see you all. We sort of set ourselves up with that rhythm for a while of seeing each other every week. But now it seems like it's been a while because it has. So it's great to be back and connecting with you guys. And I'm looking forward to what we're expecting to hear tonight. Let's go through the roll call real quick. Make sure we know who's here. Ron Campbell.
Here.
Mark Elliott.
Here.
All right. Dennis Hickey.
Here.
Kim Parman.
Here.
Rose Ojeda.
Rose is excused.
Okay. Anna Hosley.
Anna had to withdraw from the task force. She just had too much going on and was really concerned about homeschooling and getting ready for that. So she sends her best and she really likes alternative too.
All right, good enough. Thank you. Mike Schmier.
Present.
We all know he's here. Christy Switzer. Michael Newgard.
Michael was called out for the band fire.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll hope the best for him and all those who are there in that project.
For the the Oregon.
Okay. Grover Bornefeld.
Present.
Jan Lindstrom. Doug Jones, I'm here. Shonda Wild. I think we heard from her earlier. We know she's here. Paul Boundy.
Yep, I'm back. Sorry, had to step away.
Okay, great. And Gary Bukowski.
Here.
All right, super. So looking at our agenda for this evening, we're going over, as Allison kind of touched on briefly, we're going over the results from the outreach that was conducted pretty much online through July and a bit into August. We'll have questions and things like that. We're voting on a recommendation to the BCC. So at this point, hoping to look at that so we can, in September, select our preferred alternative and put that forward to the BCC. You were all sent a copy of the meeting summary for our meeting in July. So hopefully you had a chance to look at that. And I don't know if anybody's got any comments on that, any changes, corrections. I see Grover, you've got something. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to give special awards to Shonda, because she's the only person I know who can be present and unexcused at the same time.
Do we have that in the?
That's what it says, yes, that she was present and that she's not excused absence. And if she's going to speak up, she can do that for herself. But in either case, I talked to her and she said she'd talk to you before the meeting and said she wouldn't be able to be there. So
right.
Could we amend that to excuse?
Yes, absolutely.
Or give her gold stars for doing both, either one.
Sure, sure. That's the part. That's the wild part of Shonda Wild, is she can do things like that. Perhaps. Thanks for bringing that up, Grover. Anything else that anybody noticed about the meeting summary that we need to change? Okay. Hearing nothing, we'll mark that as approved. And then now I'm going to turn it over to Catherine for updates on the project.
I don't have too many updates. I'll do next steps as part of the presentation. I did want one thing, and that is that we have hired a geotech engineer, and they have gone out and done some testing for the on the Oakfield Fault. And we don't have the report yet, but if necessary, they may be going out again next Tuesday to do some borings along that fault line, but we won't know until later Monday. And they're also doing some other testing around the site too to find out more about the structural ability of. That's it.
Okay, you cut out a little bit at the end, but I think we all got that that final word. Thanks, Catherine. I know Catherine's been having some internet issues, so if she becomes frozen or becomes a robot, we know it's just the internet doing its thing. And it looks like Christy's joining us. Great.
Welcome, Christy. So I think at this point we turn it over to Brandy to review what she's come up with for us.
Hello, everyone. Well, just a reminder, since it's been a while since I've seen you all, and it's the first time I've seen you in this virtual setting. So I'm Brandy Steffen with JLA Public Involvement. And so I've been working very closely with Allison to obviously Catherine and Jennifer and Jim and all the rest of the technical team to develop the online open house and our other outreach activities, adjusting for COVID, of course, as you all know, and going to share some of the results tonight. Are you ready? Okay, I will share my screen here.
Excitement is palpable in looking at all of your screens.
Okay. Dun, dun, dun. All right, so phase 3 outreach results. So just as a reminder, what we're trying to do during this phase was to gather community feedback on the 3 design options for the Concord property. We wanted to get a broad cross-section of residents and business owners from this area. And we also tried to specifically target our underrepresented communities that you all helped us identify early on in the process, and who we reached out to during the previous phases. So we then also looked at the criteria you developed as a way to evaluate the 3 options. And just as a reminder, we did do our outreach separate, kind of in parallel to Gladstone, but it was really targeted just for the Concord property. So as a reminder, you probably all know this and have your little binders and everything, but option 1 here, just as an overview, Here's option 2. And here's option 3. So in fall of 2019, as a reminder, we went out to the public and we asked them what their programming needs were. And this is the highlight of what we heard from that outreach. So we really heard an interest in parks, making sure that there was a diverse use opportunities in this space because there were limited opportunities nearby. We heard a strong desire for a community center for a range of ages, also providing community services, especially for low-income populations. We also heard a lot about the library, of course, and providing for a range of ages there as well, but also meeting rooms and gathering spaces. So our outreach, as I mentioned, we really were looking at trying to reach out a variety of ways. So we did digital outreach, and obviously with COVID, we had to change our outreach strategies. So we looked at digital outlets that many of you had recommended, including Facebook chit chat groups. We had paid and unpaid posts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Nextdoor. We sent lots of emails, many to you all, as well as to our existing stakeholders. We sent text messages directly to the Latino families that we had connected with previously at the Oak Grove Elementary School. And then we also continued to try to reach out to the Russian community through the Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon. So trying to continue to make inroads in the Russian community. We also focused a lot on printed materials. So we printed flyers at many of these locations, most of the bottom half of this list. But then we also distributed printed flyers in English and Spanish to the Good Roots Food Pantry and the Oak Grove Elementary School lunch program. We also offered up printed simplified surveys in English and Spanish, as well as a printed, an online survey in Spanish as requested by this task force. And so that was a modification since the last time I think that you had a meeting. So there was some additional outreach to the underrepresented communities in Spanish. So what were the results? Just as a quick overview, we had about 269 unique visitors. Of those, 210 people submitted comments. So almost all of the people who visited the online open house submitted their comments. We had one online survey, or no, I'm sorry, I think it was printed. A printed survey returned in Spanish. And of all of those people, option 2 was the most preferred by participants. So some of the common themes, we heard a lot about parking size. We heard, and the layout, and we'll get into that. We heard a lot about the balance of functions and how do you compromise those different features. We heard a very mixed feedback on whether or not to keep the library separate or in the same building. We heard continued interest for green spaces and parks and providing a variety of functions. Kind of related to that was the use of the gym and mixed feelings on the new gym. And then many people were concerned about preservation of the historic building and also the views associated with that. So if you took the online open house, you may remember that throughout you were asked questions about the criteria that this task force developed, and you can see those in the first column there. And then you were asked to select how well each option met those criteria. So you chose red, yellow, or green. And then at the end of the online open house, you could see an overview for your answers. This is an overview of all of the respondents. And so you can see the numbers within each square. That is the number of people who selected that the option either red did not meet the criteria, yellow partially met the criteria, or green fully met the criteria. And you can see overwhelmingly that option 2 fully met every criteria. You can see then between option 1 and option 3, there was some variety there. You can see in option 3 was kind of split on some of the criterias. So for example, criteria D, supporting the community center and recreation activities, it was kind of evenly split of either not meeting the criteria or partially meeting the criteria. Same with criteria A, provides a welcoming and inclusive community. So people were kind of split pretty evenly on those items. So this is kind of showing us that overarching summary. So who took the survey? We saw that for the Concord property online open house, most of the people who took the survey, 59%, were living in Oak Lodge. We also had a pretty good percentage of people from Milwaukee and from unincorporated North Clackamas. But we had some other people from nearby areas, including Gladstone. We had a much better racial distribution of respondents than our first round of outreach. So this time we had about 54% who identified as white. We had a pretty equal representation of other races. So pretty evenly split between Hispanic, American Indian, Asian Pacific Islander, and African American. We also had people who chose not to disclose or didn't classify themselves in one of those criteria. So this was a much more diverse audience base than our previous round of outreach. And I was just reviewing the data, and there were actually all of the online open houses were taken in English, but many people, well, I shouldn't say many. So I think 4 people said they also speak Spanish, and I think 1 person said they also speak Russian. So we still had a little bit of more diversity there as well. So age, we had a pretty good split of ages here. So while, about 40% was over the age of 55, we had a great representation of the 35 to 44, which we heard after the first round of outreach that this group particularly was interested in hearing more from a younger audience, especially families. And so this really is showing that we hit those, that demographic. Related to that, you can see here how many of the respondents have children at home. And so, 55% do not have children at home, but then, almost the other half have 1 or more children. Some had up to 5. Some very large families responding to this online open house. This survey was mostly women respondents, so about 75%, 74%. So that is slightly more skewed to women than average, demographics, but that's pretty typical of survey respondents usually. So what is this? How do we get down to some of the details? So as I mentioned before, parking and access was a really big point that kept coming up again and again. So we heard a lot about the way that option 1 had separated parking, and a lot of people did not like that. They felt that that divided up the space and made it hard to use. We also heard a lot of concerns about accessibility, including for handicap parking and for transit users. There were also many who were concerned about just the number of cars or like the parking lots feeling too big. So there were a lot of comments around this. I think most people it seemed liked those parking lots where they were all together because it allowed more space for outdoor usage that was not assigned to cars. So those option 2 and 3. For the library, some people were concerned that option 1, again, as the parking lot was dividing the space, that the views were sacrificed and it didn't create a community-oriented space. But then others were concerned about option 2 or option 3, where it was too close to the gym, or maybe option 2, it felt too small. Or that, for example, in option 1 and 2, the larger building footprint takes up too much of the outdoor space. So again, this is that balancing of function that I'm sure you all have discussed. Several people mentioned, they were concerned about duplicating amenities, especially when the buildings were separated. So inclusion and community center. So there was mixed feedback about which of the options were really the most inclusive. And I think if I remember correctly, this was also kind of a criteria that maybe you struggled with, correct me if I'm wrong, just thinking about. So some people felt that separating the library from the community center was a benefit and provided more space, but then others felt that you're maybe separating the uses and reducing the opportunity for community building. So it was kind of, again, it kind of related to how you see that sharing or trade-offs of the functions. But many people reported, and I think this is why option 2 came up the highest, was that option 2 kind of struck that balance between all of the functions. So parks, green space, and recreation. Many people, again, emphasized how few parks and green spaces there are in this area. And so for them, again and again, we heard it was so important that as much of the site was used for green space as possible, because it could offer multiple different types of recreational use. So there were people who were very interested in trails and natural areas, and then some people were really interested in children's spaces and how to create year-round outdoor opportunities. Kind of along those lines, there was mixed feedback as well about the gym. And so some people were really interested in, 2 gyms or, making sure that there was more space that was usable all year round. And then others wanted to maximize the outdoor space. So there was kind of this trade-off. Trade-offs, the word of the night, I think. So then we got some other comments. So these ranged, as you can see, on many topics. We heard, I'll let you read these, but I think it was just really some special kind of things that people from the community wanted to highlight and make sure that the design team were keeping in their minds as the technical design team moves forward. And all of this is in the summary as well. So that is kind of the summary of what we heard. Next week, Jim and Jennifer can get into how that applies to the design and moving forward. But Allison, I could take some questions.
I think we want to hear if folks do have any questions or clarifications. And one question did come up in the chat that specifically looks at or was asking about, you know, a little bit of the disappointing turnout when it comes to the underrepresented groups that we reached out to, especially for I think in the surveys in Spanish. Brandy, could you maybe say a little bit more about this? And I'll ask folks to chime in if they have more specific questions, because I know this was something that this task force talked about a lot, and it's a key value for a lot of the folks on the task force. And maybe some of your perspective as to why that happened and what was going on.
Yeah, so I think, as I'm sure all of you are aware, the COVID has not affected all communities in Oregon in the same way. And so moving into a virtual outreach activity space, we were contending with a lot of different trade-offs. The communities that we had already established connections with during the earlier phases many were non-responsive at this time. You know, we can only assume at this point, but many, I'm sure, were dealing with health issues, you know, economic layoffs, and also many of our connections were through to schools, which were shut down for the summer. So kind of that bigger picture played into this. We did try to, as mentioned, you know, translate the survey into a simplified survey that was much shorter into Spanish. We also advertised everything in English with information in Spanish. And then for our targeted audiences, we did English and full translation into Spanish. So while the turnout is lower in Spanish, I think I'm actually pretty happy with the turnout for participants, their demographic diversity in the English online open house, and the fact that that increased substantially from the first round of open house, the first round of outreach. So while it does seem lower, and it is, you know, I mean, we're all dealing with a new reality of feedback. But we also kind of intentionally ask for a lot of detail and a really quality survey online open house that was really rich in, you know, information to kind of slog through, so that we could come back to you, the task force, with some really detailed responses of why people liked each option, so that if, you know, we were thinking if they didn't like the option that you all had recommended, that we could break down exactly why they preferred one option over the other, so that that would help you all make a recommendation. So it was a much more complicated survey than we typically do, but I think it was so that we could get the best data to help the team, including yourselves, make a recommendation. Does that answer the question?
Mm-hmm.
I see Grover shaking his head. Grover, did you want to chime in, or do we want to open it up for some other folks? Dennis, do you have your hand up, or is that just a pen? Okay, yeah, Grover, go right ahead.
I really don't have a lot to say. I asked before we went into this whole survey that we'd have quantified data as far as how many of the underrepresented groups we actually did reach, not how many we tried to reach or why we couldn't get it done or whatever, but numbers. And that's what I'm most interested in. I certainly understand we have some challenges and circumstances. We all deal with it, and it's not easy. And I'm not trying to make that, we could make it different. But I'm disappointed in we have less than 0.5% of the population in at least the Oak Lodge library service area that responded. And I got that there was a nice mix, but I still am feeling that the people who speak other languages, if we look at the proportion that of those that are actually in our service area, we didn't even come close. And what to do different, I don't know, but I don't want to just keep shrugging and then it was, well, that's what happened. And before we started this, I was very clear. I was hoping to have specific, actual reached, as opposed to we tried. So that's my only comment, really. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'm just pulling up some, a little bit more of the detailed information. Yeah, so, yeah, really, we got we got 5 Spanish speakers. And you're right, it is a low percentage compared to the entire area. And so that is true.
True. I just want to make my point was going into it, the request was to be successful and specific, and I got what we got, but I don't want to make it, oh, that, well,
yeah,
it's okay. Because it really, I think we have enough information to move forward. I don't think anybody's left out. I do think the task force is very mindful of the various, maybe not all, but more of the accessibility issues and so on and so forth. So I think that'll come out in the end. I just am disappointed in the actual results. And yes, nobody ordered COVID. And I saw your comment about that. You think that the protests had something to do with why it was off. And I scratched my head on that one, but I'm done and thank you. And I'd like to get us to move on. Okay?
Great. Yeah, thanks for those comments.
I want to see if other folks have questions, and welcome to Christy and Jan. Hi, glad that you're here. Brandy, would you mind maybe stop sharing the screen for a second just so we can see each other, and then we'll come back when we pass it over to Jennifer and Jim. Folks, any other questions, comments, clarifications? I mean, the big takeaway is your initial endorsement, or, we had that conversation, which feels like a very long time ago, but was really just not in our last few meetings, where a lot of you expressed support for option 2, and that was really validated by what the community said. So I'm curious if folks have any initial reactions to that. Are you excited? Are you feeling a little bit of the trepidation or sharing some of Grover's concerns? I'm just curious kind of to get a read from the group. Doug, you unmuted yourself, and I see Jan's hand. Yeah. So
Jan's hand was up first.
Okay, let's chat with Jan.
Okay, I was also going to introduce Thelma behind me here.
Hi, Thelma. Nice to see you.
Well, I was going to comment just on the turnout of Spanish speakers, and I've been working as a freelance census taker for the last 2 weeks. And I have met a lot of members of the community because I'm very persistent at going back again and again at the door. And what I found with most of the Hispanic people I spoke with is that the kids are better with the English. The parents struggle with English, and the kids would not be able to understand the survey. So that's where the difficulty comes in. I don't think it's like lack of desire. It's just like, what? And I also had a neighbor who told me that she tried to fill out the survey, but she had trouble understanding what she was being asked to give feedback on, the whole thing about, does this meet this criteria or whatever. She just wanted to say, yes, I like it, or no, I don't, I guess, I don't know. So some people have a hard time with that. I did too at first, and then I kind of read it over again. I'm like, oh, okay, now it's making more sense, And then what was the other topic you just brought up? I was going to add something to that, but.
Option 2?
Yes, option 2. Totally excited. Of course, I have been running around whispering option 2 at every door, but you know, aside from that.
Well, we also know that 121 people took the entire survey, which is exponentially more than all y'all here. So I know it's more than just task force members, although maybe Jan's whisper campaign, I don't know. Who's to say? Doug, did you have a comment or question?
Well, I would probably just kind of echo, definitely with echo Grover, the disappointment that but we're all recognizing that we're faced with a high obstacle and under these circumstances and not being able to have in-person meetings and such like that. I really would have loved to have seen more response from some of the underrepresented communities, because it's but I think that's typical, even existing libraries and their existing services. Mitzi can confirm this. You can work really hard at trying to offer your services and get them out there, but it still doesn't always get the word to the people who really need to hear it, and that's just a constant challenge. Yeah, it was. I guess I was not necessarily surprised that the option 2 came out, because I think it does confirm, when a lot of people talking about balance and finding, with the various needs, I think we all understood. That's why we latched onto option 2 ourselves, is it seems like the best one to kind of meet the variety of needs. So it was good to get that sort of confirmed. It's interesting to hear some of the other comments, the pros and cons and other side things, interests. But it's also worth noting that some of those could be just a voice or two. And I don't know if Brandy is able to kind of confirm that. It's, so it's not like it's necessarily an overwhelming number of people who really think we should have a robotics section, a focus in the library or things like that. But there are things to be mindful of that, because we want to try and encompass as many of those different interests and needs as possible. So it's just kind of nice to know they're out there.
Yeah. And we tried to say, like, if it was split or, like in the summary, call out kind of if it was kind of one person or if it was, a real pretty even response.
Sure.
But those like end other kind of comments were just a spattering of people.
Right. Thanks, Brandy. And thanks for pulling all this together. It looks like Kim has something she wants to share.
Yeah, Kim, over to you.
I read through all the comments, and I think that it was just really interesting to me to see the diversity of requests for the park space in general. Like, that was really fascinating. I feel like the community has not necessarily narrowed down on that piece yet. I felt pretty balanced to me. I don't have the statistics on it, but the number of people who wanted soccer versus who wanted no soccer, and the nature space. So I think that's something that we should probably explore a little bit more as a community as we get further into this.
Great. And Mark Elliott also chimed in the chat just to say that those additional comments from the participants in the online open house were really helpful to see what was important. So thanks, Mark. And Mark has his hand up, and I also see Dennis's hand. So Mark, I don't know if you want to add to that, and then I'll get to Dennis.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. I wanted to say that I was a little bit surprised by the people who responded in their comments about the parking, about there being, it seemed to them there was too much parking. And I think we kind of had similar thoughts. And I'm kind of taking that to heart myself, that perhaps as we develop, see that the scheme develop more, what are our options about reduced parking, and what impact would that have on how the park and the library and the community center is used? And are there other options for parking, such as trying to use some of the excessive parking that's in front of the the stores across the street that are rarely ever filled? So I just thought that was a really good comment, and something that perhaps we can offer to the design team as something to look deeper into as we proceed with the design.
Thanks, Mark. I see Jennifer and Jim nodding, and they're going to chat a little bit about the implications of these comments in a second. So I think Jennifer's all over talking about parking. Dennis, over to you. Are you frozen? No, you're moving. Okay. There we go.
First, a great deal of work went into this. Really appreciate the efforts made. On a normal time, it would be a challenge, and I appreciate all the efforts that went in on it. I guess the one thing, I'm not sure exactly how it was worded, but it had to deal with the restrooms. And I'm wondering how one would approach the design of restrooms, a male, a female, or a family restroom, or non-gender, or that sort of thing. So that's maybe Jennifer or Jim. I suspect that's not something that's been decided or discussed at this point, but since the comment is there, it does seem that we should chat about it at some point.
Well,
and just to remind everyone, the comment was kind of about providing gender inclusive or non-binary restrooms and lockers and potentially family changing areas.
Yeah.
Well, with that segue, we're going to come back to hear more from you, but it seems like a couple of our questions are really a great segue into the pieces that Jennifer and Jim are going to walk us through. So why don't we go back to the PowerPoints, and then we'll come back together for more discussion in a second. Jennifer, it's all you.
Thanks. Yeah. So I just want to note that Ray Johnston was not able to join us tonight, but Jim and I are here, and we also have Kurt Lango with Lango Hansen and Ken Ballard, our operations, rec operations, so, and JLA. So just wanted to acknowledge that there are some other voices to some of these things. So there were a lot of interesting comments. It was really nice to see that a lot of the comments in the summary repeated concerns or comments that the task force had. So that did allow us to see that there are some similar themes that we need to be exploring. There were also comments that I think came out of not sitting through all of the task force meetings that we've had. I think there were maybe some people who didn't quite have the same understanding about some of the shared understandings we have. So did understand that. But we did see definitely some groups of subject areas that we're going to be pursuing in design in the next phase and into the design phases beyond the alternative refinement. You know, things that we need to pay attention to, things we need to have more discussion and more feedback from you all and the public. So let's move on to the next. So obviously, as Mark noted, parking was a big point of conversation in the public survey, as it has been in our meetings. And all these things we have listed in here are the things we're going to be looking at as we move ahead to focus on in more detail and get more answers. You know, as you are all aware, the county has parking requirements, and we are going to be going through conditional use process. And as part of that, we have the opportunity to potentially reduce the parking requirement within the code. So we will be doing everything we can as a team with NCPRD to make sure that we can get that reduced. And Mark's ideas, I think, are excellent, and we will be looking at different ways we can consider shared parking, make the case for all the parking we do have in the area already. So that's definitely, we'll get more answers as we move on in the process and keep that conversation going. There were lots of comments that we also know that we need to really think about accessibility from the street, accessibility from bus stops, for all kinds of people that are using this facility. So that's definitely going to be at the top of our conversation as well. How ramps are designed, you know, with distancing, how we'll have distance for people passing each other, thinking about those sorts of things that we're now paying more attention to, and really looking in more. We haven't paid as much attention at this point because we're at such a high level, but we will be looking at, paths, bike access, bike parking, understanding how people using the building will be able to be accommodated that way. And then we got a lot of comments about the loop trail, which was interesting. And there were some suggestions for some other things that I think were really worth considering and looking at further. So we'll be diving in a little more into the design of the natural space that we'll be able to take advantage of some more opportunities for sure. Jim, I haven't given you any room because I can't see you on my screen, but if you have anything to say, feel free, any of you, to jump in here. In terms of the plaza and the park, plaza was very important to a lot of people, as it has been with the task force discussion in terms of how it can be used, how it can provide room for events. So we will be looking more carefully at how that space is developed so that we can support those things. Lots of support for the water feature. We're happy to see that that has gotten a lot of public support and seen as a real gathering opportunity for families and all types of people using the space. But I agree with Brandy's observation that the natural space is really important to the public, and they want to see this space developed in a way that we do give priority to what is in this area and really focus on that as part of the park space itself. A lot of these things that we'll be looking at further, really reiterated what we heard from you all before. Connections between the library and the plaza. We did talk about that at one point. And then also making sure that in the design of everything, the playground, potentially restrooms, outside, areas where families and small children can be accommodated, because they'll be big users of both the recreation piece and the library and the park. So those will be pieces we'll be going on into. In the library, it's interesting, I think there was not an understanding by the public that the library program was the same for every option. And I think because some of the space was shared with the community center as an option too, some people taking the survey did think that they were getting a smaller library, which in fact they were not. So I think that was a little bit of confusion, but there were some really good points that we will be picking up on in the design, in the next efforts and beyond, about access, finding that balance of space for books and space for people, especially with discussions about COVID and how we want to make sure we build in adaptability, flexibility in the design to accommodate both. I think that was on people's minds, and we'll need to continue talking about that. The idea, which has come up before, about how we provide in the library open spaces where there's a lot of room around, but then also opportunities for enclosed spaces where you might have a different type of experience for a different activity within the library. That's something we'll definitely be looking at further as we develop the library more. And the points about program areas, that has come up in both public and in task forces. And I think what's important to understand about that is how do specific programs like this influence the space program of the library. So if there are specifics about certain areas, we'll want to make sure that we're diving into the meaning of that in a physical way. The restrooms, this came up and has come up before in the library design as well as the community center design. So it's carried in both pieces, but we haven't developed that as a layout yet. And we will want to talk about how do we provide restroom access as shared access. Do we need to provide restroom access within the library specifically? And how do we accommodate small children? Do we how do we successfully provide restroom and locker room opportunities for everybody in any way that they desire. So we'll be focusing in a little bit more on that and some layouts and how that can work. And then there were a lot of questions, which was interesting. It hasn't come up too much in our task force group, but we will be looking further at what are the maker spaces? What does that mean to you all? You know, arts and crafts versus a more intensive tools and equipment space. I think that's important for us to understand what the collective vision is on that. Community center actually didn't have as many comments as the library. I think there were a lot of library supporters really interested in the survey, but very similar issues about shared access, independent access, you know, what happens when the library's closed but the community center's open, and vice versa. How do we make sure that all the areas that we need accessed are accessed? So that's going to be important as we move forward. Noise came up, obviously library next to gyms, making sure that we're accommodating that. Restrooms, locker rooms, again, same that we just discussed, making sure that we're diving into that deeper to have a better understanding of how that's going to look. And similarly, the maker spaces and of supporting families in all the spaces. And then lastly, just as a focus, you know, obviously there were a lot of thoughts which had to do with reuse of the existing building versus building new. And I think this survey did help people understand the implications of both. Generally, I think there is support to reuse and to keep the longevity of the building through successful renovation so that it does have a long life. So that's, you know, obviously with the existing Concord building, talking about seismic issues and what the redevelopment looks like. But generally, I think it seemed from the comments there was a lot of support for reutilizing the Concord building in some form and fashion. And then these we kind of touched on before, you know, understanding seismic better, understanding adaptability and flexibility with COVID, and making sure that we're designing something that is efficient for the library staff, recreation staff, that can be operated well, but doesn't require more staff than can be afforded. So I think that kind of summarizes specific things that we'll be looking at. Obviously, we're looking at everything, but this public survey really did reiterate some of the concerns, I think, and questions that we had before, and is going to help us focus on specific things to be looking at. Jim, did you want to add anything to that?
No, that was a great summary.
So I think we'll just, questions or comments about any of that, or?
Yeah, I'll Brandy, can we stop sharing screens? There were a couple questions or comments in the chat. Jan chimes in that sounds like when the Oak Lodge Community Library advocates have done surveys, that parking continues to be a key theme. Is that correct, Jan? Yep, you're nodding your head. Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Say that it may have to do a lot with the current state of parking at the Oak Lodge Library, which is like, you know, 6 spaces, and then you have to walk all the way to the back, and so that could be making people overreact to the parking. And then also when you see it on a schematic or a diagram or a blueprint or whatever, it always looks bigger because you don't have any lines on the ground or any landscaping around, so it's like this vast parking. That's my comment. And also there's no public transit hardly, so, you know, people are going to be driving.
Doug, I see your hand. I just want to note Gary also had a comment or a question about parking, asking if there needs to be additional loading and unloading kind of specifically for buses. You know, if the senior center was taking folks up to the library, does there need to be additional space allocated for that? Was that the spirit of your question, Gary? Yeah, okay. Jennifer, I don't know if that's something you can comment on or if that's kind of a later phase thing.
I'm giving Jim and Kurt room to speak if they want to. obviously, yes, it will have to be accommodated. We have to think about that because those are going to be users of the center and the library. And those are going to be parts we're going to get into in more detail as we develop the parking and the right-of-way design along Concord. Those will be things that we'll be looking at. Kurt, do you want to add?
Well, I guess I'd just like to say, and I definitely agree with what you're saying, is that currently we are showing loading for both the center and to be shared between the center and the library. The exact length and being able to accommodate, those buses, also just drop off, and what Jennifer was saying is something we'll look into more detail as we go into the next step.
Thanks. Kim is a big fan of the tool library. Thanks, Kim. And Grover has a question that is actually the perfect segue into the final piece that Catherine's going to cover. So we're going to hold that question. It's really about the best way to continue to provide suggestions on some of these tweaks and talking a little bit more about refinement. So Grover, hold that thought. And Doug, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Yeah, I was going to add one final thought on parking, if we haven't talked about that enough. I don't, at least in terms of libraries, I don't know a parking, I don't know a library, and Mitzi might be able to echo this too. I don't know if I know a library that doesn't have patrons concerned with the lack of sufficient parking. I don't know a library that says they've got plenty of parking. Maybe Wilsonville isn't too bad. I'm usually able to park when I get to Wilsonville, but that might be the only one. And, I'd like to think we're being optimistic. And I mean, we have to weigh, as was mentioned, that hopefully, I think Jan was the one to point out, hopefully improvement in people's transit options, no longer, not simply driving. But in the meantime, I'd like to be optimistic and say there will be times when that parking lot is full, and we'll be glad we have it. If we make it difficult for people to get there, then we're defeating a big part of our purpose. So as much as we hate giving up the valuable space to something like parking, I'm a fan of having plenty.
Yeah, we know it's a hot issue.
One comment that, it's really interesting as the comments go from, can we reduce parking? Can we add more parking? So it's really about finding that sweet spot and maximizing what we really need. It really is a problem if people can't park to get to the library or community center. So it really comes down to more about, I think, how it's designed, that we need to make sure there's adequate kind of landscape buffers. It's very apparent when you go to a parking lot and it's just a sea of asphalt, with a few small trees. And so I just think the onus is on the design team and Kurt and all of us to figure out how to, maximize the parking, but make it a really nice experience and have the parking lot feel like it's part of the park. It's a introduction to the park. So that's what we need to do.
Folks, we're going to talk a little bit about next steps, kind of big picture, and then in the immediate next steps. But a heads up, you might have seen this on Catherine's agenda, but the next meeting in September, if you all feel that you're ready, and the hope is that you may be, is to vote on a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. And then that going forward on a preferred alternative, and then work happening on refinement. And Christy, I just saw that you chimed in on parking as well. So thank you for your comments. Folks can read in the chat as well Christy's thoughts, because I know you have small children experience, Christy. Thank you for that. But I want to create some space in our discussion. I think we heard a pretty clear message in your meeting when you did your evaluation as a task force, with a clear preference for option 2. But there were some areas that were trade-offs, and that I think some members kind of expressed like, well, option 3 has some good things and option 1 has some good things. And the options that you put out to the community seem to all be pretty viable, and to varying degrees and your varying perspectives. But I'm curious from the group, if you feel that there's anything that you need to discuss as a group before September. If you're feeling like you're ready to rock and roll in a vote, and we'll talk a little bit more about refinement. And I'm conscious of Grover's question. That's a really great question about continuing to feed back into this. But kind of as what you've heard from the public, how Jennifer and Jim and Kurt have sort of framed this and some of the design implications, how are you feeling? Are you feeling pretty good? Do you feel like you're ready to vote together as a group? Or are there other things that you'd like to kind of air out in the open together? I saw a thumbs up from Kim, and Grover's got his hand up. So Grover, over to you.
Well, when you talk about that, so I'll use the Milwaukee Bay Park process as a thing to play off of. So they had 3 in a public meeting that came out, and there was enough feedback and whatnot, and they were able to integrate into, it was a different design group, but it was the same JLA. They were able to integrate into the next iteration a whole lot of input, and that really is the question that we're holding that I have, which is I have a whole lot of things that I would like to make sure gets fed into, don't want to make the decision, but fed into. So when you say at our next meeting, we have to decide, or we're hopefully we can decide to say, yep, BCC, we know what we want and this is it. Does that mean it's not still going to be, all right, I'm going to be bold here and say, okay, option 2, but with this variation or this variation or this variation, that I could still live with. But if we're going to say option 2 as it is at this moment, I can't see between now and next meeting any process that allows me to be comfortable making that kind of determination. I hope that answers your question.
Are other folks kind of sitting with a similar sentiment? Like it'd be useful to think, to know kind of what's coming? I saw Doug nodding your head. That's good enough for me. Let's talk a little bit about what the next sort of phases look like. Brandy, can you pull the PowerPoint back up? And I think this is Catherine. This is over to you. And then we'll come back together because Grover, you make an excellent point. Mark Elliott also has his hand. Mark, actually, do you have a comment that you'd like to make now? Go right ahead.
No, I think it'll be helpful for, gosh, I do this for a living, so I kind of know what's coming. But I think it's going to be helpful for others to understand the design process and that this is a beginning, not an end. So I'm going to let you guys talk some more. And I did want to make some comments myself later after you've gone through that.
Cool. Well, when we get back together, we'll come straight over to you. For now, over to Catherine.
Okay, thank you. Just to double check, is the next slide the one that talks about the future phases? For maybe Jennifer to talk about? I'm just...
this was our last, can you see the arrows?
Yeah, okay. Okay, so thank you. I thought there was another slide. So these are our immediate next steps. This is basically what I've been talking about usually at the end of the meeting, but Brandy made it look a lot better. So I'll go through that, but I do think your question, Grover, I think we can talk a little bit more about that as a group without the slide up. But so I'll just run through this quickly. So we have our next meeting is on September 10th, and that is the time that you would make a recommendation to the BCC for a preferred design option. And the goal is for then the design team to take that preferred option and do some refinement to it. Grover, you used the example of Milwaukee Bay Park. Our alternatives are so different. This is a master planning process, and that project actually was a little bit further along in design. So I don't think there's going to be as many opportunities to sort of do mix and match as that project, but I do think there are some, and I think they're really important. And I'll just talk about it briefly here. Like, for example, I think there are a lot of different ways that the plaza could look and elements in the plaza. And there are lots of different ways the park could look. And so I think some of those things will happen in that refinement phase, but most of those things are going to happen in the November, December design and engineering phase. so then we go into a refinement phase, and then after that, we'll have another task force meeting. Have you really take a look and understand some of those refinements that have been made based on a lot of the things, some of the things that we heard here tonight, and then we would take your recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners for consideration. And then our goal after that was to have a really great celebration, get more word out, continue getting the word out about the project, and continue to looking for partners and getting our citizens involved in the project and understanding it better. But that will depend on COVID. We will do our best to figure something out to replace that if necessary. And then after that, design and engineering begins. So the design that will happen at that time is called schematic design. And it's really a very early, still a very early stage of design. So there will be a lot of work that happens during that time. And we will have a way to engage you as we move through that final process.
I think Jennifer,
I think Jennifer, if you could add a little bit
Yeah,
more.
I think, and this might address what Grover's speaking to, I hope, a little better. I think
you can stop. You can stop sharing the screen now, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what option 2 represents is that the community and you, if this is the option that moves forward, has decided that the library is better as an addition than a freestanding building, that the project would contain a new gym as well as retain the existing gym for other uses, that there would be a balance between the park, the library, and the community center, and the associated parking so that one doesn't take over the other. That's what option 2 represents. And that there are shared amenities rather than duplicating amenities with a freestanding building. Those are the concepts that I think we're voting on moving ahead with. Obviously, we're at such an early stage. So many of these things are going to develop further. They're going to be influenced by more discussions. We're going to, it's that process that we talked about in the very beginning. It's iterative. So we kind of go 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and we keep moving forward and we keep refining. But what we're showing in these concepts, what we end up with in the end, it won't be the same as what we're looking at now, but it is having an understanding of those big decisions, I think, moving ahead. I just wanted to add that because I think
yeah, thank you, Jennifer. That was well said.
Okay, I'm seeing some nodding head. I saw a nodding head from Doug. Thank you for that. So it sounds like, the vote coming up in September is about some of these big broad stroke concepts. There will be the refinement period. You'll have an opportunity as a task force to review some of those refinements. And then the really fun stuff, and Grover, to some of the points you raised in the chat about materials and some of the specific, bathroom configurations and ADA access will kick off in the next design phase. So additional thoughts, feelings from folks, kind of where you're sitting, looking at voting potentially in September and sort of your comfort level. I'm curious about your temperature as a group. And Mark, why don't you kick us off, because you also had some comments from the last Q&A time.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So I just, excuse me, just had something in my throat, apologize. So I guess I wanted to share, what my expectations were in making this decision and understanding what's going to happen next. And so I think where I feel we are is in a great place, having set guiding principles for the project, a basic program, a pretty well-defined master plan that we can move forward with that has enough flexibility within it for us to make a lot of refinements and for the design team to develop those refinements during the next few phases of the design process. And so I guess my expectation is that as we go through those different steps, the next one after this is finished, after this master plan process, as we go through schematic design, that we're going to have other touch points with the public and with other people outside of this task force to get more additional feedback as that refinement takes place. And just from my own experience and having, done this for 40 years or so, is that you always expect that refinement to take place. And I often sometimes describe the design process as starting, like jumping out of an airplane with a parachute from, 30,000 feet up. And when you start from there, what you see is the country where you live. And as you get closer to the ground, you start to see the state. And you get a little closer and you see the city. And you get a little closer and you see your neighborhood. And that's the way it is in the design process, for me at least, and I see that over and over again, is as you start to refine, you go from really big picture to more refinement, closer in, more detail. And so it's helpful not to circumvent that process to dive right into the detail too soon, because it's easy for you to lose the big picture and if you haven't created that big picture yet. So I'm just encouraging our group here to, you might have some, fear or concern about making a decision too early. I guess I feel very comfortable with what the design team has put together. There's enough flexibility there and a lot of good input from people that moving forward, I feel comfortable to make a decision myself.
Thanks, Mark. Christy, over to you.
I agree a lot with what Mark said. My gut check right now, I'm having a really hard time with the turnout of the people who gave us feedback. I'm really struggling internally. I've tried to do a lot of education recently on what is it that me as a white female does that potentially can make someone who is a minority not feel like they are taken care of or listened to or made a priority within their own community. And I'm just having a really big gut check right now, being complacent with the results from that survey, if I'm being totally honest. Do I think that it should stop the whole project? No. Do I think that the overall gist, if we were able to get into people, would be that option number 2 would be the outcome? I think yes. But I do think that I wouldn't be following my gut and what I think is right. We need to do a better job of reaching out to our community. If we have 120 people who filled out the survey, and I'm looking at 50–60% of those people were from the Oak Lodge, Jennings Lodge area, we're talking, what, 60 people maybe? And of that 60, I guarantee 20 of them are on this Zoom call right now, and we all filled it out. So to be real, 40 people from Jennings Lodge and Oak Grove area that are to be serviced by this library filled it out. And to me, I think we need to not accept that at this stage of the game. I think, yes, like Mark said, we're looking at a really big picture right now, and making the decision for the really big picture is okay. But I can say moving forward, I will not feel right moving forward with programming and a lot of more of the specific things without a much more thorough feedback from our community. And I'm sorry if this sounds abrasive. I don't mean to be rude. I appreciate all of the work that has been done, but I just am having a big gut check right now on not speaking up about how I really see that we need to do a better job.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, that's what we want to hear. And as a public involvement specialist, I know Allison and I were like, well, we want more. I just wanted to clarify, it was, we had 210 responses. It's still not representative of the overall community. So your comments are still very valid. The hard thing with these surveys often is, they're not statistically valid the way that we do them. Statistically valid surveys are very complicated and intensive process. And so these are always a little bit biased, right? Because they are self-selecting. The respondents are self-selecting, as opposed to more of a scientific where we take a breakdown of our community and make sure that we're hitting all of those demographics.
And I totally understand your limitations during this time and all of the, I'm not necessarily, I hope you don't think I'm blaming you by any means, or saying that you didn't do as thorough or of a job that you were capable of. I just think moving forward, we need to think outside the box or get more creative or do something different to make it more inclusive.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Jan, I see your hand. Shonda has also had her hand up. So I'm going to get Shonda and then Jan. Shonda, are you able to unmute?
Yes, hello. I feel okay with proposing number 2 to the BCC with the understanding that we can put forth a major kind of list of refinements that more align with the vision and values and the specific needs of our community. I agree that the response was lower than I had wished, but I understand that many people do not respond to these things, and I don't quite know how to further reach that. A carnival or a parade or something, I don't know. I did notice that some of the survey comments stated that the questions seemed predetermined. At least there was one person that continually commented on that. And I'm wondering if a secondary blast can be more open-ended for these 3 options and maybe a little bit easier for those that can't deal with surveys to understand. Other than that, I'm fairly good to continue and prose this and go forward. That's my comment.
Thank you, Shonda. I'm going to go over to Jan, who's been waiting patiently.
No, I was just going to add that while we didn't get a huge number of, Hispanic people in the community responding or whatever, that doesn't mean that as we continue going on, I mean, Mitzi can speak to this, but in terms of the programming, that's something you continue to do outreach on. The design of the building, I think it was Rich Nippon, and I don't remember which meeting he called into, but he's been a bookseller and an educator and a librarian, and he talked about the fact that you would ask Hispanic people in his community, I think it was Chicago, how do you feel about the input on this building? Oh, wonderful. It's wonderful that you're going to give us a building. We wouldn't dare to even suggest how you should make the building. We would just feel weird about that, and that is a point of view that some people have. But in terms of like the programming, we can program to anybody in the community, whether or not we have their feedback. I mean, it's better if we have their feedback, but there are also library journals, studies, things, that you can read in various literary areas of the world about how we should program it to meet the needs of our community, so long as we have the best demographics of who our community is. And also when the schools are back in session, it's going to make it a whole lot easier.
Thank you, Jan. We're getting about to the time in our agenda when we want to open it up for public comment. And we do have some folks here who have been observing the meeting. But any other thoughts, considerations, feelings from the task force? I guess maybe I want to also see, Grover, I see your hand. Anybody who's maybe feeling a little uncomfortable right now, this might be a great time to also voice some of that. And Grover, before I get to you, I just want to see if anybody who hasn't had an opportunity to speak would like to take that space now. Okay, non-verbal. Oh, Ron, yes, go right ahead.
I just wanted to add that, first of all, a lot of work went into this, and I appreciate all of that. It's a complicated project for the larger body of the population. It was a bit complicated in terms of the survey and I don't know how you could have done it any better. Just given all of the things there were to consider and everything that was being considered and all of the questions that were being asked of people. And so I wouldn't be too hard on yourselves for the fact that it was a somewhat low turnout. Because again, for the general population, the questions that were being asked actually were a bit complicated, so you can only expect so much. And I think, in the end, I see this as a process, and this is the way these projects go anyway, that the process to a point quite a ways in the future is going to continue to be a process of refinement. And in that process of refinement, there would be more people that would be likely to speak out on certain aspects of the project, but looking at the bigger picture, I can't help but thinking that people are going to be very happy with the alternative that is being put forward as the preferred alternative. I don't see otherwise. So don't be too hard on yourselves. I think you did a good job.
I just want to follow up, Ron. Thank you for that comment. And part of the reason this was complicated is because it is a complicated set of options to review. As we all know, we ended up with a lot. But part of the reason for diving in deeply on each of these things was that had the community not responded in with the same sentiment that I think you all shared about option 2, we needed to understand if it was different, why was it different? So we were trying to balance how to put that information out and get very specific information to inform us. I mean, it's great that the community saw the same as you all saw, but if they had not, we would need to understand why that was. So that also made the survey a little bit more complicated than most. Brandy or Allison, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I did want to make that point as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Grover, maybe we'll take a final comment from you and then head on into public comment.
Well, yes, I just appreciated that we're waiting to answer the question that I posted, and which is, assuming that in September, so is there room between now and September to give comments that will affect anything, or are they frozen as they are now, and then we will have to decide in September which of these frozen options, with the room that it can change, but which of these frozen options do we recommend to the BCC? And then, as I appreciated the skydiving perspective, then we can start narrowing in on the specifics around that final option to include the kinds of things that I listed in the chat. But also, there's people who wanted to know, for those who know Bob Zimmerman, he said he wanted to make sure I would promise that I would ask, are we going to have a commercial kitchen? Because the need to be able to have a kitchen available for the community and have people be able to use that kitchen, etc. But I notice in all the drawings, the commercial kitchen that's there now is going to be wiped out. That's a particular example. And then I also get a lot of comments from a number of people about, well, Oak Lodge Library is the repository for Clackamas County for historic documents. And I haven't seen anything about adding that in. It's been brought up before, and it's always, we'll get to that later. I just want to make sure that later is coming. I also want to thank Christy for her comments, because I share her concerns, and about the only thing I think we can do in the process is, as we go forward, keep being very open to, keep reaching. But I don't know that I'm in favor of having a stop until we get that done. It's a balance of trying to do both. But I know we have lots of people like ADA access. Where is the ADA parking specifically? And I have comments and thoughts about using the Spalding exit to yada, yada. But I need to be able to get that in. I can have all of it thrown out, not one of it used, but I have to know that the people doing designing are hearing those things. And so far, I haven't had that opportunity. I'm done. I'm done.
Let me just quickly, I think that almost everything you said would be picked up in further design. Maybe not in refinement, but in schematic design for sure. And just very specifically, yes, there will be a commercial kitchen. It's up off of the community room, the large one in the community center. It's maybe one of those things we've talked about as a lot as a team, but we did, and it was in the program, but it wasn't, maybe didn't show up in the drawings. I can't.
Okay, it does show one on the back of the library is the only kitchen that I see that shows up anywhere, other than the kitchen workroom, which is next to the existing kitchen. But on the second floor, there shows a kitchen. So I don't want to work out those details. I just want to figure out what's the best method to be able to suggest things and have them be heard. They could all be thrown out as long as I know they were heard. So I'd like to hear the answer to that question.
I think that
Jennifer or Catherine, I think, Catherine, you sort of, it sounded like you were answering that question by saying when schematic, those things will be addressed in schematic design when that begins in November. Is that correct?
Yes.
Jennifer, can you confirm?
Yeah, and I think, Grover, what you're asking is this going to be addressed before you go to a vote? We're not doing more design work on this until next month, so we aren't going to be addressing those specifically, but we definitely want the comments so that we can respond to them and talk about them as we move forward in the design phases. So I think the question is also, how do we do that? How do you give comments? How do you get responses to comments? And I would continue, I mean, I don't want to speak for Catherine, but I would say send them along, and then, you know, we need to have time to go through them and speak to them and talk to you and talk to the group about specific items that you, like, for example, what you just brought up.
Okay, and I'm fine if September is just a matter, because I can't vote for anybody else, but of all the choices, option 2 is the only one, but option 2 with some alterations is what I see around all the topics we've been talking about. ADA access, bathrooms, parking, but still building off the option 2 model. That's where I sit, can't speak for others. And I can go forward with that as long as we will keep moving forward and looking at, and like we talked about, the outside of the addition. What will it look like? And because there's a lot of room for that. So I'm done. Thank you very much for that. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Well, we're closing in on the end of our meeting, but Doug, are you all right if I open up? Oh, sorry. Catherine?
Yeah.
Yep.
I just think that's a nice way to put it, Grover, is building on option 2.
Okay. Doug, I saw your head nodding.
Go ahead, Allison.
Okay. So if you are here to give public comment this evening and you've been watching the meeting, you can raise your hand or you can press *9 on your phone. And we'll just give a second to see if anybody's going to do that. Again, if you're here to give public comment, you can raise your hand. All right, I'm not seeing any. So we're going to close public comment period. And Doug, it's back over to you.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks, team, both design team and task force team. I think we've been putting a lot into this, and it's shaping up quite well. I really like kind of how Jennifer put it, which I'm thinking, because I had some of the same thoughts that Grover had. I like the way you put it is, you know, we're looking to vote and in September to say, okay, option 2, it has the best potential as far as a framework to go forward with, to say this is something we can play with and refine and make into something that with lots more input, both from our group as well as from the design team, that turns it into something that our community will really respond to. Christy, I want to acknowledge you because I really appreciate you having that voice, because I think it's something probably most of us would agree with, but not necessarily have thought to express it. I think it's really important that we, especially now in light of things that are coming to our own awareness in this current year, that we make sure that what we do offer down the road is going to be serving as much of our entire community as possible, and is drawing on their input, however we manage to get that. And so I really appreciate your voice once again, Christy. Thanks so much for that. So I don't know that we got from Catherine, when's our next meeting?
September 10th at 5:30.
Okay. You guys all take care till then. It won't be such a long wait to see you again, but enjoy your holiday weekend. There's one of those squeezed in here, whatever that means for you. Take care, and we'll see you then. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.